initiative. This BGA builds on that, but the MNRF was not anymore part of it. And then, of course, there's that reality on the ground that most of the MILF are from the Maguindanaoans. And the Taosogs and I think Maranaos are not really part of the process.
Now, this brings up an interesting point, because the other thing that often gets brought up is that there are actually two main divisions between the Muslim community, as you pointed out, between the Taosogs and the Maguindanaoans. Now, on the day of the SONA, when I was asking the government spokesman, Secretary Duresa, about this, what he thought was taking place was that instead of expanding the present ARMM, that you were going to create ARMM Part 2, which would have fitted into this ethnic division between the Muslims themselves. Now, was he just being disingenuous, or was this actually a serious proposal that has simply been overtaken by time?
Well, if his concept is creating a separate ARMM Part 2, then it would not actually jive with the territory of the tribes. For example, if you're talking Cotabato, in the present ARMM, the Maguindanaoans are already part of it. Remember, Maguindanao and Sharif Kabunsuan. And then the other part, which are also Maguindanaoans, the proposed ones, would be part of the ARMM 2 or VGE. I think he's not telling the truth there, because when the document came out, it basically included both ARMM and the new territories.
Okay, speaking of the new territories, we'll be showing you in a few minutes a map. But before we get to that map that we'll be showing the territories of the expanded ARMM. Here it is. Okay, if you look at this map, this is a rough approximation of how it would expand. There's a much larger area here. What are the implications of this? Now, this is the sort of maximum demand of the MILF. Is this something that the government would have to deliver in its entirety, or has the MILF sort of come up with sort of minimal expectations for success?
Well, if we base ourselves on the Memorandum of Agreement, because there is a process for a plebiscite as the final step, then it would mean that this map is the maximum.
Okay.
And this can still contract depending on whether people who are included would agree to it.
Now, you've reviewed that agreement. There are concerns about, will it be done on a province-by-province basis or a barangay-by-barangay basis? There's over 700 barangays involved here. What happens if one barangay says no and it's surrounded by barangays that say yes? Is this a factor that has been...
I think there is a problem there, because the one I knew when this particular proposal was proposed 2 years ago, the framework there was autonomy, not really a state within a framework of a federal state. The problem here is, of course, if one barangay says no and another barangay says yes, the one who said no would still be part of an existing jurisdiction, but the one who said yes would be under the BGE. So it would stand out like an island, maybe in a sea of
okay, let's focus on this difference you pointed out. So what you're telling us is 2 years ago, we rewind to when the negotiations were first gaining ground. The framework was very different from today's necessary transformation, if the agreement is to be followed, to a federal system. Because under the present-day agreement, the commitment of our government is basically the commitment of the United States to the Philippines in 1935, independence, almost everything except foreign affairs. Now, under this, in the original agreement, are you saying we were more similar to what, let's say, Hong Kong enjoys with regards to the rest of China, but sort of one nation, two systems?
Yes, 2 years ago, the government panel was experimenting with the concept similar to a Hong Kong concept.
And and China, of course, is a unitary state like we are today.
China would never recognize Hong Kong as even as a subsidiary state. It doesn't have that kind of a relation. In fact, there's a specific timeline for the integration of Hong Kong into China. But that was the original concept that was being discussed at the time. It never went beyond the autonomy framework of a unitary Philippine state.
As far as you're concerned, the MILF would have been content with that arrangement?
Well, of course, we don't know now because we were never party to the actual discussions, and that's part of the secrecy of the whole process. But if we went by what eventually came out, then this particular memorandum of agreement creating the BGE basically created a state.
Manolo, we have a question here from one of our studio audience, Jahan.
Yes, my name is Jahan Kalam. I'm from the UP Muslim Students Association. My concern is, why is the present administration eager to push for this peace talk to happen? I mean, is it probably just a way to pave in Chacha? Because I know there are conflicts with regards to the Constitution and the deal that they're having. So I just want to know if that's, a possible reason.
Yeah, Mon, as a political analyst, what is the incentive? I mean, we're used to Philippine governments dribbling the ball, so to speak, just delaying things so that it's never quite resolved with Muslim groups. Why this sudden acceleration?
Well, as I've said, there was a change from the concept or the proposal 2 years ago. And the change in the concept was this particular creation of a BGE, which is basically a state. Now, a state can only exist here if we change the constitutional order, meaning we are now in a unitary state. If you want to go federal, that's the alternative, you have to change the constitution. And the BGE, as a concept, can only be a reality if there is such a constitutional change. So you can infer that the government, of course, it knows that it will have to go through a constitutional change. Then you can infer that there really is an agenda, another agenda other than the peace process going into the whole thing.
Now, is this a case of a confluence of interests where if presuming that the MILF originally was content for a Hong Kong-style scenario and that it has evolved to a statehood scenario, who proposed it, or is it a meeting of the minds because both sides have politically much to gain from this?
Well, I would say that the MILF gained much from this present agreement. It's more than Hong Kong. And if we're talking of the historical demand of the MILF and even of the MNLF, it's independence. And this kind of a concept, the BGE, is much closer to independence than would a Hong Kong arrangement be, or some form of autonomy. So from their point of view, I think they're content with it. But the question actually is why the government had agreed to this arrangement.
No, if we go basically back to the map, which we'll show you in a few minutes again, but in terms of this thing, am I correct in assuming your question was basically saying, is the Philippine government acting in good faith in wanting a real solution, or is it acting simply because it has its own political agenda? Is that correct?
I just want to make sure that the intentions of whoever is involved in both sides are of a noble purpose. That's why I asked that question, so that it would be what could be
what's in store for us, basically.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think? I mean, is this first of all something that the government can and is willing to deliver, and is it something that the MLF thinks seriously the Philippine government is prepared to do?
Well, if there is an opinion actually existing, I think it came from Father Bernas, who sees nothing wrong in a negotiated concept for a federal Philippines in the negotiations. I would beg to differ on that, because the mandate given to negotiators can only be from the Constitution. And the Constitution says the only allowed framework here is autonomy. And it's like